Hey everyone, wanted to drop in at the top of the show to let you know that this week's episode isn't going to be suitable for all listeners. While we're all adults here, there's more swearing and suggestive themes than we're used to, so you may want to listen without kids around. However, we do have a lot of fun this week, and you're going to want to stick around for our conversation. And as always, I'm Perry, and this is my Bourbon Podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of This is My Bourbon Podcast, where we discuss the spirit of Kentucky. My name is Perry. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm super excited, let me tell you about this week, because I have two super special guests on. They are the hosts of one of my favorite podcasts about one of my favorite shows, Arrested Development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Colin Cox and John Phelps from the Hop Ons Podcast. Guys, hey. I'm so happy you're here.
Hello.
Yeah, you're the
What's
fucking
up, guys?
big times now, man. You got these A-listers on here, and
and we're just, this is what I like to do, is bring A-listers on and get them drunk. So
thanks for having us, man. This is actually really cool. This is our first
absolutely
experience with any, I've never done long distance podcasting. Have you?
No, I can't say I have.
So this is a first for us as well.
Well, this should be. I mean, I've Google Hangouts with other people before to record podcasts. So.
Oh, good, cool.
Yeah. So, for anybody who is unable to tell, we are in fact in different states. I'm in Kentucky, and you guys are in Tennessee, right?
We're in Southwest Virginia.
Okay.
We're about 10 miles. We're 10 miles from Tennessee. We're right on the line.
Okay. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know why I thought y'all were in Tennessee.
Well, John lives in Abingdon, Virginia. I live in Bristol, Virginia, and Bristol is a shared city, so it's shared between Virginia and Tennessee. Yeah. We're right on the border. Something a novelty thing someone can do if they come to this part of the country is to stand on State Street and, hey, guess what? One foot is in Virginia and one is in Tennessee. It's amazing. And that's what people really like to do.
People just stop traffic and they're like, got to take a picture. Look.
It ruins everybody's entire day.
Check it out.
So yeah, that actually happens a lot, but that's why why sometimes people think we're in Tennessee or other times in Virginia. But
and you're in Kentucky, is that right?
I am in Kentucky. I'm about 30 minutes south of Lexington.
Okay, I've been to Louisville twice, maybe.
Okay, Louisville's like an hour outside of Lexington.
Oh, cool.
I can't say I've ever been to Kentucky. I've never had the pleasure of traveling to, I believe, one of the, like Virginia, one of the 5 commonwealths. Is that right?
Yes.
That's Kentucky's a commonwealth.
It's the nerdiest
Kentucky
thing.
is, in fact, a commonwealth.
There are 5 commonwealths, and I believe 5 commonwealths in the United States.
So glad I'm learning all this, man.
Fact man over here, Colin Cox.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Oh, buddy, it's okay. I'm just super happy to have you guys on in general. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time tonight talking about, of course, Arrested Development, but also bourbon, as we always do, and we're going to be drinking throughout the show, which is, a great thing to do on a Monday night when you...
Oh, I've already gotten started. Yeah, this is...
Oh, good. Yeah, well, I had a glass already, too, so that's perfectly fine.
I think the way to gauge my sobriety, if you've seen Arrested Development, is to just imagine that episode where Lucille falls because she's so drunk. I might get to that point at the end. So if I stop talking, that's what happened.
Yeah, I can drink one glass and then I just am sweat man all night. So I don't know if I'll keep it. I don't know if I'll keep it up because it's already pretty rough.
What a horrible superpower to have, though.
Yeah,
sweat man.
It's if you don't want to have any friends, you sweat man. I have the power to clear out an elevator because no one wants to stand next to me.
It sounds like you were part of Batman's horrible rogues gallery in the 60s. Yeah.
He just can't get his hands on him because he's so damn slippery.
Okay, so I have this feeling, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do you guys know much about bourbon?
No. Now,
okay.
I know it can only be called bourbon if it's produced in Kentucky, correct?
Well, we will get to that in just a second because I figured that we would do something in the spirit of the Hop Ons podcast. For those who have not listened before, Colin is a big fan of quiz shows.
Oh, yes, I am.
Oh, hell yeah.
For people who once listened to the Hop On podcast because they just stopped listening because of my silly games. Yeah.
So I figured that I would do a little quiz to see how well you guys know bourbon. This is taken from liquor.com.
Okay.
So you guys can work together.
Okay, great. Good. Okay, we're on a team. Good.
Yeah. Okay, so the first question, there are 8 questions. The first one is, bourbon has to be made in Kentucky, true or false?
True.
I'll say true.
Okay.
Oh, but now I feel like it's definitely false. Hold on a second. Because when you asked earlier, he got real sneaky with it.
Well,
do you think it's true?
Well, I remember hearing this, that for it to be
where,
called...
Though?
Well,
when you were dreaming, when you were asleep?
Yes, exactly. No, so
Fever dreams.
All bourbons are whiskeys, but not all whiskeys are bourbons.
What?
Correct.
It's like a weird Venn diagram.
Yeah, so I think to be a bourbon, it must be made in Kentucky.
Okay, we're going to say true. I'm going to go with true.
Okay. That is, in fact, false. Bourbon has to be made in the
fucking damn
United
it,
States.
Colin. I told you.
I'm so sorry.
According to liquor.com, most bourbon comes from the Bluegrass State. 95% of the planet's supply is born here. But by law, it just has to be distilled anywhere in the U.S. And we typically like to go, Kentucky bourbon's the best bourbon, but there is still really good bourbon outside of the Commonwealth.
Oh,
I think we've actually had Virginia bourbon before at my house.
I think we've had
Bowman
Virginia
Brothers?
whiskey.
Yeah, Bowman Brothers, right? They make a bourbon, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They do.
I'm sorry.
They do.
I take responsibility for that. I'm so sorry.
All right. Perry, hit me with the next one, please. Thank you.
Okay. There are more barrels of bourbon in Kentucky than there are people. True or false?
Oh, wow. Okay, so...
Well, Kentucky, I've been to Harlan, Kentucky, and there's, nobody there.
Yeah, so... What, do you want to say true? That feels true.
That feels true.
That feels like a fun fact. We're going to say true.
That is, in fact, true.
Hey!
Our population of 4.3 million is seriously outnumbered by the 4.7 million barrels of bourbon currently aging in the state. That's a whole 400,000 more barrels than there are people. Almost 500,000 barrels
shit.
more.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
And we're consuming, I can only guess that we're consuming more bourbon than people are dying in Kentucky. So, I mean, that's an interesting case.
Real dark that we just went there. Do you think that, have you, Perry, have you ever been to Harlan, Kentucky?
I've not been to Harlan, Kentucky, but I've always heard that you'll never leave Harlan alive, so.
I went to a
country song, sorry.
I went to a Civil War reenactment there, and it was about as fun as you could think it is. It was really bad. Don't go there is what I was going to say. Unless people from Harlan are listening to this, then God bless you. But I don't know if they have internet or or computers.
But they have bourbon, so.
Hey, well, they're doing okay if they have bourbon, right? Yeah.
All right. Is there another question? I'm excited.
There are 6 more questions.
Oh, God. Oh,
this is question 3 of 8. Yeah. True or false? Straight bourbon whiskey must be aged in new charred oak barrels for at least 4 years.
Oh, I want to say false.
Let me repeat
go
that.
Ahead,
Just so we're clear. Okay. Straight bourbon whiskey must be aged in new charred oak barrels for at least 4 years. True or false?
Can I explain my methodology?
Yeah, it seems so fucking peculiar.
Well, that's what I mean. It seems peculiar enough that I bet 95% of that is true.
But he changed the one number.
He changed something. So
did you write? You didn't write these though, right? Liquor.com.
No.
Right?
This is from liquor.com. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's different.
I want to say false.
I would like to say false.
We're going to say false.
It is in fact false.
Yeah.
While bourbon must be aged in While bourbon must be aged in new charred oak barrels, meaning distillers can only use the barrel one time, The whiskey is only required to age for 2 years.
See what I mean?
But there's a caveat there. That's for straight bourbon whiskey. Straight bourbon whiskey has to be 2 years old. But if it's younger than 2 years, it has to be called just bourbon whiskey.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
That's really bizarre. Wow. Okay.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
So many rules.
That's very strange. All right, cool.
There
okay.
are. And one of the weirdest things about aging bourbon too is that by law it doesn't have to be aged any certain amount of time. So you could basically just shoot it through a barrel and it could be called bourbon.
Oh. Well, I bet that's how we got away with it in Virginia.
No, Bowen Brothers is legit stuff.
Is it good?
Man.
Okay, yes.
It's good stuff.
You
It's
drank
good
it all.
stuff.
I had 2 bottles and you drank all of it.
Not at one time, but...
Wow.
Okay, question 4.
Question 4, bourbon must be made with at least 51% of what ingredient? Rye, barley, corn, or wheat?
I'm looking on the label. It's not on here.
Can I say barley? I want to say barley.
With notes of sweet vanilla. Hold on. We are your bourbon.
John.
Well, it's not rye.
No, I don't think so.
That would be like rye whiskey, right?
Yeah, so I want to say barley.
Barley?
Okay.
That sounds like garbage, though.
Well, I mean,
What's that? So the answers I have are barley, rye and wheat, wheat.
And corn.
Oh, it's corn.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay, I trust you.
We're going to go with, no, wait, maybe it's not.
Okay, we'll say corn.
say corn.
Final answer.
It is in fact corn. Bourbon has to be at least 51% corn in its mash bill.
Wow, I never knew that.
And then from there out, it can be any combination of rye and barley or wheat and barley. The barley has to be there to produce some of the enzymes, during the creation of alcohol during the fermentation process.
This is fascinating.
No, I didn't know that. Yeah.
I just want this to be the rest of the episode.
Yeah. It might, depending on how fucking long it takes us to get through these.
I'm okay with that. I mean, again, if you've listened to the Hop Ons podcast, you know I'm okay with these things just going on and on.
I hope that like you're gonna get some people coming back like, oh, they're talking about something different. Maybe there won't be a stupid quiz show, and there's gonna be a stupid quiz show.
I can't tell you the number of emails or tweets, people saying, love the podcast. Colin, can you stop with the quizzes?
I like the quizzes.
Well, I did too, but...
I did too. I thought they were a lot of fun. I mean, especially when it was like Stump John time too.
Well, I know that, but I almost felt like that was a bit unfair. Yeah. Okay, what are we on? Question 5 now?
Okay,
Yeah,
we're on question 5, yes. True or false, there was no bourbon produced during Prohibition in the United States.
Well, that's got to be false.
I want to say, I mean, listen, we've seen the Untouchables.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's history.
That is definitely, if anything's history, it's definitely the Untouchables.
We'll say
It's the
false.
Untouchables. Yeah.
We'll say
It
false.
is in fact false.
Yeah,
yes,
there
it is false.
Okay.
They used it primarily for quote unquote medicinal purposes during the Prohibition era.
That's pretty, I would do that, yeah.
That's why in Kentucky you can still go to some pharmacies and buy liquor there.
Right now you can?
Yes.
What?
That's the most amazing thing I've ever heard.
Kentucky's baller as hell, dude.
I know it is. We should move to Kentucky, but let's stay away from...
You walk in and you go, I got the vapors real bad. Do you have any of that bourbon laying around?
No, they have like a whole liquor section. Oh, like a liquor and wine
I see
section.
what you're saying. Okay, all right.
Yeah. It's not for like medicine.
Yeah, it's like
just you can
vitamins
go
and
in
then liquor and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Question 6. During bourbon's aging process, some of the liquid escapes from the barrel through evaporation. What is the term for this lost portion? Phantom portion, specter's share, devil's cut, or angel's share?
These all sound like names for Bond
They all
films.
sound like really great. Either Bond films, like terrible, like hipster bands that are around here.
No, that's true. Oh my goodness, I don't know, John. Do you want to go with the first one, the second one, the third one, or the fourth one?
I like Devil's Cut.
I like Devil's... Yeah, I know this because I saw a commercial with Mila Kunis. Is that her name?
Mila Kunis?
Yes. It's Devil's
Cut.
Is it Devil's Cut or Devil's Share? It's Devil's Cut, I think.
Devil's Cut.
Okay, so your final answer is devil's cut.
Correct.
It is, in fact, not Devil's Cut. It's Angel's Share.
Devil's
Cut.
I got that wrong.
Devil's Cut is a actual brand of Jim Beam bourbon, or an expression of Jim Beam bourbon. Where
that may have been the commercial I saw. Clearly, she lied to me.
What they do with it's a weird, like, convoluted kind of process. But what they do with Devil's Cut with Jim Beam is they're supposed to extract some of the bourbon that was supposedly lost to the Angel Share from the walls of the bourbon barrels.
Oh,
it's a very
okay.
Yeah. It's a very bizarre, like, name and idea behind it, but
It was a confusing commercial, to be fair.
it was. I understand. Because she's throwing a lot of things around, but okay, question 7. During aging, bourbon-filled barrels are often kept, in multi-story warehouses called rick houses, spirit shacks, bourbon shelters, or barrel huts. I'm sorry, some of these are so dumb.
I don't know. Do you want to say?
God damn, those are all really bad.
I think I like barrel huts.
Barrel huts? I like spirit shacks. We should open up a honky tonk around here.
That's where you go meet your shaman.
The Spirit Shack?
The Spirit Shack.
Yeah. Do you want to do Spirit Shack?
We're going to go with Spirit Shack.
Okay. That is incorrect. It's rick houses.
Rick houses?
Rick houses, yes.
Why?
What?
That's stupid. What does that mean?
I don't know. That's the one thing about bourbon I could not tell you.
Is it spelled R-I-C-K?
Yes. And then houses.
Was it just like the first dude that ever like had a building?
It was Rick House.
His name was Richard
Hey, y'all want
House.
to put them in here? You got them barrels you want to put it? Hey, thanks, Rick. From that point forward.
Default Kentucky accent, by the way. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that was I was about to ask what the hell you were doing, but
I was born in Burlington Gap. That's how Rick would talk if Rick was a human.
Mr. House, Rick House.
Mr. House.
Okay, final question. Final question. During which president's administration did Congress declare bourbon an indigenous product of the United States?
Oh.
Franklin Roosevelt, Lyndon B. Johnson, Jimmy Carter, or Ronald Reagan?
Oh.
boy, I want to say Johnson.
I want to say Carter because he didn't like do a lot. Maybe that was like one thing he like.
What do you mean Carter didn't do a lot?
What did he do?
We'll talk about this later.
Oh my
Really?
God! I'm gonna say. Who are you saying?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like the kind of thing Lyndon B. Johnson would do.
Because he was like afraid people thought he killed Kennedy. So
Oh no, he drank a lot.
all right, we'll go with LBJ.
It is, in fact, LBJ.
Hey, see, yeah.
Look at
I
you
think
guys.
we got like half of them right.
You
Yeah, I
got
think so.
62% right.
62%, not bad.
I'll take that.
That's like a low
That's still
D.
passing in your.
I'll take it.
That's still passing in your class, right, Colin?
Well, yes, yeah. With the curve, so
yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's trying to stump Colin and John with how much bourbon knowledge they
Not much. Not too
well,
much.
62%. I think we did okay, all things considered.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not like upset about it. Or
Next time, I'll
anything.
get a test prep packet for us.
Oh,
and
sure, yeah. We'll
be
get
good.
like a book and
Yeah,
stuff.
I'm-
and
I'm sorry, I wanted to surprise you guys with that one. It
Oh
wasn't,
no! Thank you for the
okay, yeah.
surprise. That was really, really wonderful. I enjoyed it a lot.
Well, I'm glad. So one of the things I always like to ask newcomers to the show is two particular questions. How'd you start drinking bourbon? And like, do you have any that are kind of your go-tos? Or is it just kind of a light hobby for you?
You go ahead, John.
Yeah, so in 2013-ish, yeah, I for my birthday, one of the police officers where I work at the police department, he gave me a bottle of Blanton's for my birthday.
Very nice.
Which I know is like more on the high end of bourbons. I had never heard of it before, and I just truly kind of took to it. And that same year, I got Knob Creek as a gift. I got a bottle of Eagle Rare. I don't know why people thought I was like a fucking alky for some reason in 2013. And I got a bottle of Buffalo Trace and a bottle of Bowman Brothers, all in like a 2 year. So like
Oh,
really,
goodness.
the bourbon chose me, I guess is what I'd say. But I'm not much of a heavy drinker at all. I like to have it nightcap occasionally, mixed drinks occasionally. That's about it. Colin's drank most of mine. Yeah, when we record the episode.
Yeah.
Just to kind of ease us out. Although it makes me just hot as hell, so I don't know why we want to drink it when we record our episode.
Well, those episodes are usually the more entertaining.
They are
ones.
more fun.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's family, they enjoy drinking, and this is something I think we'll talk about when we talk about representations of alcohol in Arrested Development, but they're
absolutely
rather unapologetic about just enjoying drinking. And I mentioned it on the Hop Ons podcast. I have type 1 diabetes, so beer is a problem, and I can get real sloppy real fast with wine because I drink that shit like Tyrion Lannister on Game of Thrones. I just don't know what I'm doing because I nervous drink just anything. So bourbon has a tendency to slow me down, my father-in-law is someone who has resources, and he has a lot. I don't know how to describe it, but he keeps a lot of really nice.
He has gangster
bourbon.
money, is what we're saying.
Well,
he has gangster money, and he has a bar. And
but I remember trying Jefferson's, Blanton's Woodford Reserve at his place.
Yeah.
And just drinking it neat, and it was delicious and delightful. I like spicier drinks, and again, I like wine, but if I'm not careful, I'll drink half a bottle of wine in 30 minutes and not remember what happened before that and after, of course. So I like the routine of it. That's something I really enjoy. I'm someone who's in many ways dictated and determined by his routines and schedules, and having a bourbon or having a whiskey or having I prefer Scotch actually to bourbon, but
really,
I do actually. I like the peat flavor a lot, and I know that doesn't really pop up in bourbon, but I know John's
Not
making
even
a face
bit.
right now. Yeah, John's making a face.
The peat flavor?
Yeah, I like peat. Yeah,
like just dirt. Is that what you're talking about?
It's more earthy, John, than anything.
Oh, that sounds Harry. That sounds really bad, dude.
I'm not a big Scotch drinker, and one of my buddies, Chad, who, along with his girlfriend Sarah, runs a bourbon show on YouTube called It's Bourbon Night. Their friends keep trying to get them into drinking Scotch.
Oh, yeah.
And it just 100% will not take for Chad. And we keep trying to goad him into doing a YouTube series called, like, Chad Drinks Bourbon, where it's just him in a big leather chair with a smoking jacket, and it just zooms in on him. And, like, every time that he takes a sip of Scotch, he just, like, coughs and goes, "This is horrible." And, like, that's the end of the episode.
Well, it certainly takes some time, and in many ways it feels like you are taming a beast of sorts. But I think and this is the last thing I'll say because I know this isn't a Scotch podcast, but if I think like bourbon, at least what I've noticed by listening to episodes of your podcast, if you come back to it enough, you start to discover flavors and things you enjoy you definitely didn't notice the first time, that may have even felt like an aversion the first time. And that's what I really like about Scotch as well. It's just such a unique flavor. It's the kind of thing that is very hard to find in an alcoholic beverage, that peat flavor, and I think that's what I like about it so much.
Yeah, I worked at a cigar shop for about a year and a half, and
did you really?
Yeah, I worked at Sidetrack on State Street.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was my second job.
I didn't know that.
And like reps would come in all the time and with like cigar samplers. And anytime there was like a party for like Ashton would always bring out a bunch of Ashton cigars. They'd always bring a bottle of Woodford and was like, "This goes well with this cigar." So that's probably the first place I actually tasted bourbon. But it was free, so I just throw it at me and I'm going to drink it. But yeah, not until somebody bought me Blanton's did I ever think I bought a bottle of. I used to buy like the sweet garbage, like Bailey's and anything that's just like real not manly with air quotes.
It was Woodford Reserve with me when I tried that for the first time, and I think my reaction was something as simple as oh sweet God, this is so good. this does not taste like Jack Daniels. This
doesn't taste like peat.
No, that
is the worst. This is very peaty. I could, before you come in the next time, I'll take your glass out to the river out here, and I'll put some mud down in it. I'll say to make you feel at home.
I thought you were going to be a lot nicer than that and like blind him with a glass of scotch and a glass of bourbon and go, which one do you really like, Colin?
He'll be able to tell.
Yeah,
this one has more dirt flavor.
Well, I was about to say, my goodness, you would need to be dead to not tell the difference between bourbon and scotch. You can. I mean, if it's a peaty scotch, which some of them are not.
Just don't say it anymore.
I'm just going to keep saying it. Just. Anyway. Well, that's what Michael Bluth drinks. He likes a scotch. He likes a peaty scotch.
In what episode does Michael Bluth drink scotch?
Oh, it's the episode from season 1, season 2, when they do the flashback where they're talking about persuading Lucille to go to rehab, and he said, "Is there a single malt scotch?" And it's probably a peated scotch.
How do you know that?
What do you mean?
You have like a weird Rolodex for like weird Arrested Development shit.
Have you not been doing this podcast with me?
Yeah, I don't remember that. Of course I remember. Yes.
You guys, are you guys fighting? Do I need to leave?
No.
We're sorry. This is normal.
This is like the cottage cheese conversation all over again. Deep cut for any Hop Ons podcast.
I was gonna ask you, John, if you'd come around to cottage cheese yet, or if you're
man. It's just I don't understand how people could put that in their mouth. How can you open that and look at it and go, God, that looks good?
Well,
this bowl of floating white garbage.
Under no circumstances did I argue that it looks appetizing. I did not say that.
Do you not even look at it when you eat it? You just have to kind of like.
I try to look away.
And that's something you want to argue with me that's going to taste good?
Well, I'm not arguing that it.
It makes sense that you're a fan of dirt flavors.
Listen, there is nothing more transcendent than a peaty scotch and a bowl of.
Well, so kind of as I've alluded to, our topic for the show is not just going to be one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Arrested Development, but also kind of the way that it portrays alcohol use and abuse. And like whether or not that's a realistic, and I don't want to get, I mean, this is going to take turns that are going to be almost essay-ish, I think.
Yeah, with this one right here sitting next to me.
But I just like I want us to like, take a less, I don't know, angry look at it. I don't know. Like I can't figure out exactly what the phrasing is there, but like I would like for us to have a pretty, realistic conversation at least about what Arrested Development says about alcohol use. But anyway, we'll get there. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. The first thing I want to ask you guys is, what is it that you really like about Arrested Development? Because it's not the easiest show to to like, I think.
Well, I think that's actually what you just said. I think that's really interesting, and that's part of what I like about it. It's not a show. It's not hard to like Parks and Recreation, for example, and I think there's a lot of similarities. We've actually talked about this on the podcast. They share a lot of creative DNA, but Arrested Development really invites you to think about a story without necessarily thinking, do I like or do I dislike these characters? Because too often that seems to be this default reader reaction or reader response. This was good because I liked the characters, or this was bad because I disliked it. Well, when you create a show where frankly everyone is everyone is unlikable and it's impossible to like anyone, then you need to start thinking about other sorts of things. And that's maybe one way into thinking about why Arrested Development is interesting. No one is really likable, but they're not so. This is not like the British Office where everyone is so villainous. They don't have moments where they redeem themselves. And I think Arrested Development plays with that tension in really interesting ways, because even characters like Lucille, she has these moments where even though you would probably think of her as someone who's deeply unlikable, she has moments where you understand what's motivating her. Yeah. And while you may not like her, you understand. And I think it's a show that's maybe trying to do that, which is different, because a lot of sitcoms, they thrust characters into this likable, unlikable camp. And that's not that interesting to me. Yeah,
I think that the show for me is one of those shows that I'm a big fan of really smart writing, and Arrested Development I think does that better than any show, or
absolutely,
probably any show sitcom wise ever. Their narrative lines are just insane, and Hurwitz must have like a whole room that's just whiteboards that he's written all this shit out on from the get go, and it's just really enjoyable. You know, like my earliest memories watching the show where it was talking about it with you and Jono and
right.
Rob and like all these, and so I have like a lot of good memories wrapped around the show. But if I like step out of that, I think it's just the writing, the characters are really, really great and funny. The family dynamic works really well. I think the reason that it's so much better than British Office, not that it's better like paralleled with it, but the characters in the British Office, there's always a lot of heft to them, like with Tim and Pam. Is that her name? What's the British Office Pam?
Her name's not Pam, but
British Pam.
British Pam.
Them trying to figuring out if they're going to be a thing, and like when like David Brent fires her, like that's a big sad thing. But there's never anything sad in Arrested Development unless you make it that way. But no, but
I think there's a lot of sadness in this.
No,
show.
there is.
You could argue too that Job's entire storyline in season 4 is one of the saddest pieces of television.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just heart-wrenching watching him go through some of those phases of his life. But at the same time,
I would even extend it and say, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, the only thing I was about to say was I think actually when you just pull back a little bit, Job's whole story is sad. There's nothing not sad about Job from the one of the first things we see is Job trying to persuade his father to get in the Aztec tomb and George Sr. dismissing him. And that just begins this long 4-5 season journey where Job is perpetually disappointed because his dad doesn't love and appreciate him. It's just there the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And that is when you say that, it's impossibly sad. But Hurwitz is good at I guess, kind of pulling the wool over your eyes and not letting you out of that box, so that even though all these moments are sad right after it, there's always a really stupid, like, Tobias fell down or something goofy happened. And,
well, you see, John, I think that's really insightful, and I would even go as far as to say I think what makes this show so unique. So if you think about it in relationship with a show like Friends, for example, I think Friends, despite its deficiencies, has at times really smart writing, but the humor and the comedy and the world building, it's almost exclusive to what I would call dialogue utterances. So when characters say funny things, but with Arrested Development, just take a situation like Job and Franklin. So not only is it just funny conceptually, but when we first meet Franklin, there's a flashback to when Job introduced Franklin. And it goes even a step farther, he has his own music as well. It's just, there's all of these different layers of world building and storytelling that I don't think you see in a lot of shows where characters get their own songs and theme music, the way it bounces around, and that's part of that documentary style. I think in that way, it is wholly unique. In a lot of shows, they might borrow elements and components, but Arrested Development really has all of it, and that's what I really like about it.
Yeah, like if you took the Franklin storyline and you put that storyline in like the American Office with like Michael Scott doing it, it would be funny, but at the end of the episode, somebody would be like very concerned for his psyche and what he's doing and what he's going through and like how depressed he is. But
and that would be the end of it.
Yeah.
That would be the end of it.
You know, Job has a black puppet, and it's just great.
As you said, Job has a therapy puppet.
Job has a therapy puppet, and everybody's cool with it. And
I totally buy into that. By the way,
that's
100% buy into that theory.
That's John. That's one of my favorite arguments you've made, is that Franklin is not only Job's therapy puppet, but he's also maybe Buster's therapy puppet.
Yeah, or the family's in general.
He's just the family's therapy puppet. Yeah. I like that.
Well, I feel like we've kind of talked a little bit, and not in a, I don't know, like we've talked a little bit negatively about it, about the show as a whole, like going, well, it has all these layers to it, maybe not negatively, but in a way that isn't necessarily approachable to a first-time viewer. Do you guys think that the show is approachable to a first-time viewer?
I think if you have the Oh man, this is so hard. We've talked about this before. I mean, if you're okay with coming in at the beginning, then absolutely. But if you come in anywhere else, probably not. I mean, it rewards you for. It's much like Game of Thrones. Like, there's no way you jump into Game of Thrones like season 2, episode 4, and have any fucking idea what's happening. But like Arrested Development, you could at least. Yeah, it's the same thing. Like, if you don't mind not knowing the narrative, then sure. But I think it is really, really hard for a first-time viewer.
And I've tried to Sorry, Colin.
No, Perry, please go ahead. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I've tried to say to my wife before, because my wife is not a big fan of Arrested Development, and I've even said to her before, I don't think you've seen the right episodes, which is like almost, it's kind of the default notion about certain shows where we go, oh, it takes you a little bit of time to get into, the whole story and the relatability with some of the characters. Unfortunately, though, like in hindsight, I realize that statement is just incorrect, because you do have to really start from the ground up with Arrested Development. I mean, it requires 100% of your attention. And with that too, and this kind of goes back to my reasons why I like Arrested Development so much, is that I could give 100% of attention in one episode to Michael, but that would mean that I would be losing 100% of attention, or even going 50-50 between him and, say, George Michael or Tobias, because all of these secondary or tertiary characters are constantly doing things that I haven't even noticed until, I've just gotten through, however many, I don't even know what time it was that I've gotten through this show now, and I'm still noticing new things. And like recently you guys were talking about, this has been a couple months ago, but when Job is first starting to allude to the fact that he's dating Anne, and he says, "My religion girlfriend."
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. I just noticed that for the very first time watching it like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, and what you're talking about right now, I guess I would say something else that's worth thinking about. I'll start by saying, I think audiences in 2018, John mentioned Game of Thrones, and it's funny, you were talking about it, and I was thinking about it. I think audiences in 2018 have a fundamentally different understanding and relationship with television than they did in 2003. Absolutely. So if we take a step back and think about 2003, television for the longest time was if you think about this hierarchy of visual entertainment, there's visual art, there's film, and then there's TV, right? But today, my God, it's completely acceptable for Matthew McConaughey to do True Detective and then win an Oscar for a film. This is not something that happened in the late 90s and early aughts. If you were a TV actor, regrettably, you were a TV actor. If you were a film actor, then God help you. You didn't need to debase yourself by doing television. Right. And there's a small handful of examples. Someone like George Clooney, who did television in the 90s but was able to transcend it. Because of that, I think if someone came to Arrested Development in 2018 and started at the beginning with shows like Game of Thrones and other shows that, again, just expect more from an audience. That's one of the notes I wrote down when I was looking through your questions and thinking about how I would respond. Arrested Development asks more of an audience than maybe an audience was ready for in 2003. Yeah. But I think 15 years later, people are absolutely...
It's common, like every Netflix show and yeah.
Yeah.
And that, too, I think that's important, too, to the format of the show itself, is that it almost seems like, and it may just be a product of the culture as it is now, but it seems like it benefits more from being a bingeable show, quote unquote, than it does a show that you have to watch. Sorry, my wife just walked in. That you have to watch week to week. No, she's gone. Like I said,
she's wearing headphones.
Yeah, she couldn't hear me at all.
You just shouted loudly.
John, we've been recording for 40 minutes now, right?
I'm so sorry. It's the wild turkey, man.
Just now saying hello to me 40 minutes into the podcast. I see how it is.
Yeah.
But I think the bingeable quality is, I think that's fair, Perry. I think that's a really nice way to think about it, because we spent a lot of time, especially in seasons 1 and 2, talking about how, well, if you were watching this for the first time in 2003 and 2004, even though there was more consistency than I remember, I guess the narrative that I had constructed for myself was that Fox it was on Sundays and then it was on Tuesdays and then they created a whole new day just for an episode of Arrested Development, and things were just so frenetic and chaotic, but it was still positioned in these places where it wasn't inviting to someone who wanted to watch. But now, my God, it's as easy as just going to Netflix and watching episode after episode after episode. And when people talk about Arrested Development, and what made it popular long after it was canceled was really just DVDs, right? People buying the DVDs and just watching them incessantly. But that's something that's harder to track, because we're talking about something that isn't digital, but something that's very material. But now Netflix knows how many people are watching Arrested Development and binging it. And I think that's a great way to think about it, that in a binge culture, a show like Arrested Development is perfect, but it was made at least the first 3 seasons before we really started binging things.
I mean, people probably watched it in 2003 era and was like, this is weird. This is weird. Why do I need to watch this comedy show with these storylines? This is weird. Because whereas a show like Malcolm in the Middle, or even I think it was on the same time as the Titus show. I think that came on right after that. But it was there
was a bit of overlap.
Like these comedies that didn't have a laugh track and still, had none of them have an overarching narrative. Maybe they had 2 episodes that went back to back, and even The Office has an overarching narrative, but it's 2 seconds of an episode that continues that narrative. The rest is just a bunch of gags and it was weird. It was kind of really, really out of its element in 2003.
Well, and it's also about just thinking about how a television for the longest time was episodic, but it wasn't really serialized. And there's a big difference between those two, because now you can tell this big serialized story because people can consume it differently. That's harder to do. You're right. You were talking about Malcolm in the Middle or that 70s show or Titus. It's not like Friends and Frasier didn't have these season-long arcs. They did, but they were different and they required less. And I would argue they were the kind of arcs that were so conventional. Will Frasier, for some reason, sleep with this super attractive one? It's will Laura Linney decide to sleep with Frasier? It's the answer should be no, unambiguously.
Yeah.
But
somehow he gets it.
Somehow he seals the deal. I don't know how, but it's that's a really conventional narrative arc. Does the guy get the girl? But that's not what Arrested Development is doing. It's telling a fundamentally different kind of story. And I think, just to harken back to what we've said in this portion of the conversation, being able to consume it when you want to consume it, I think that makes all the difference.
Yeah, sure.
And as far as a serialized or episodic, style of storytelling goes, I think that's why, and despite all of its faults, I think that's why season 4 of the show actually does kind of work in a way. It takes the time to, and did you sigh at me, Chuck Phelps?
I did. I sighed. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, and I think that too. We might have to add in a little bit of a question here too. What is it that separates the original run of Arrested Development from its Netflix run? Because I think that's an important part of the conversation behind what makes this show work or doesn't work. But what I'm getting at is that, despite the fact that season 4 has its faults, it does take the time to make you feel like you understand each character a little bit better.
Yeah,
and
sure. I can get behind that. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I think that whereas each each season of the Fox run focused on the Bluth family, because that's what it was. That's what every episode told you at the very beginning. This is the story of a man who tried to keep his family together. Whereas the original run of season 4, the original cut, as it's now being called, was about how everybody had to exist outside of the family of the Bluths. And I think that, you know, where all of those stories converge is what makes Arrested Development so interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think that's actually beautifully said, because at the end of season 3, Michael, it doesn't seem that important, but he offers what I would describe as a kind of promise or injunction for what will come next. He says to George Michael, let's let them take care of themselves for a while. Which, if you wanted to read that as like something almost prophetic, that explains why season 4 looks and feels the way it does, because after season 3, Michael wasn't there to take care of everyone. So they were left to just fend for themselves. And I think you're right, Perry. I think it's too often, as viewers or readers or audience members, we get really upset when something doesn't feel like the way we think it should feel. And we're only about halfway through the original run of season 4. But what I found is that it's much better than I remember, but the floor is a lot lower. So those George Sr. episodes in particular just don't work as well. And that's okay. I'm open to the idea that Arrested Development isn't a perfect show, especially with episodes like that. But
we've talked about that, and I think that is what makes it better, that we found faults in it, and we're not just rabid fanboys, even though we are pretty big fanboys.
Sure.
This is my first time actually watching season 4 the whole way through.
How far into it are you, John?
Where we're at right now, so episode 7,
okay.
I think.
We finished 7 episodes, yeah.
Yeah, and
7 just came out yesterday, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, as of recording. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, as of recording. Yeah. And it's one of those things where initially I think I was really stuck up about it, and I was like, this isn't my Arrested Development. I want the old stuff. And
I don't know who this character is.
That's like old timey Willie or something.
Yeah.
And
he lives in that part of Kentucky that doesn't have internet.
In Kentucky. I like what I wanted.
Yeah.
Mr. Rick House, please get back into
Rick really likes Arrested Development.
Rick loves Arrested Development. No, but I do think that, like, I mean, I've said before, I'm not a fan of some of the comedy, and I do think that a couple episodes have been very weak, but narratively, what they're doing is really interesting. Like you said, I mean, maybe the comedy's not there, but the storylines that Mitch Hurwitz is trying to weave together to dovetail together, it's really good, and he's doing a good job with it, and I think that ultimately is making me able to survive watching this season. Well, I am enjoying it.
We talked about this in the last episode, that what Hurwitz is maybe trying to say about family is that try as you might, and Michael has tried on so many different occasions. We've seen it in flashbacks. Try as you might to extricate yourself from your family, you just can't do it. In the first 3 seasons, that was quite literal. Michael was just there with his family. But what we're seeing in season 3 is something slightly different, where they, unbeknownst to one another, just happen to be occupying the same spaces.
Yeah.
So I think even though season 4 looks different, I think Hurwitz is still grappling with a similar theme, which is what I like. This seems to be the one big idea that he has about family with Arrested Development, and he's just presenting it differently in season 4.
Yeah, well said.
Well, I still don't think that we're able to, like, it still seems like we're kind of talking a little bit nebulously about Arrested Development, and not necessarily in the most positive way either. But do you guys think that you'd be able to sell Arrested Development to somebody who's never seen it before? And like, my pitch to them has always been, well, it's a guy who comes from a super rich family who doesn't necessarily feel or want to be super rich, but he's trying to deal with the loss of his family's assets, and humor ensues. You know,
I think if you could say that, picture like the straight guy in somebody playing the straight man in the Trump Family, and film that. That's what this show is.
I mean, it's
what this is. You
put
the straight guy in the Trump Family, make Eric a fucking magician, and that's all the show is.
And I don't know the political affiliation of your listeners, and I don't mean to offend anyone, but if you're someone who If you're someone who
try to
pays
stay as loose as possible, but
sure. I mean, if you pay attention to politics and if you're under any circumstances unnerved by the shenanigans of our president, just imagine that, but not a tragedy, but a comedy.
Yeah.
And because Hurwitz always talked about how Arrested Development was a riches to rags story. So if you're and that's what I also think is quite
perfect.
Yeah, I mean that's what I think is quite palatable about the show is that this is a show that's taking a family that has experienced a kind of wealth and privilege, and it's just utterly tearing them down. And it's not a system outside of them that's tearing them down. It's their own foibles and misdeeds. And there's something not only satisfying about it, but something quite funny and silly about it. Because I guess the question I always ask is, well, how were they able to fail up this far?
Yeah, they just constantly fell up.
They just and
it's like that's the story of Trump. That's what his fucking biography should be. I failed up to the top, and he ended up. I mean, that's how I would sell the show. Really, I mean, not trying to be political. Obviously, you kind of know where my beliefs lie, but I think if you said to
We're
anyone,
not getting too far into it, I hope.
Wouldn't you like to see like the behind the scenes of this crazy administration and have one dude who's like the moral compass try to keep it together? That's what the show is, and I think selling it that way is a lot better than saying there's just like guys trying to be a good son and his family's awful. And I mean, it's like it'd be hard for me to just like synopsis the whole thing out.
I mean, and I guess when we talk about other shows, especially with the first 3 seasons, shows that were more successful, we also talk about Frasier a lot, and I think a lot of people really misread Frasier, and they think it's a show that is celebrating that kind of lifestyle, and I think the correct way to think about a show like Frasier is to think it's actually satiring that kind of lifestyle.
100%.
Arrested Development is doing something quite similar, but it's not so flirtatious about it. It basically, I mean, if you watch Arrested Development and think, wow, what a great family, you clearly missed something. But I could totally see how you could watch Frasier and think, oh, those smug assholes. But there's a little more subtlety with Frasier and less subtlety with Arrested Development.
Yeah.
But that's maybe how because I think it's trying to tell a kind of story that a lot of sitcoms don't tell. This isn't a coming of age story. This isn't about a group of 30-somethings in the city. This isn't about I mean, it is about family, but it's not about, these people are just together and my God, they can't get away from one another. There's elements of that, but there's something else very specific. Yeah. The kind of social, political, and economic underpinnings to this show that I think have become increasingly relevant, at least in 2018. That's maybe how I would try to sell the show.
Yeah, at the end of season 3, I talked about how I think that Arrested Development is like the best look into what the American dream's supposed to be, and I still kind of stand by that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's super broken, and you're constantly you think you're going somewhere, and the whole time your wheels have been spinning the entire time, and people stab each other in the back to get what they need, even family. And I mean, I think that's really what it is. If you want to look at Friends is this idea of what perfection would be for like an American dream, but Arrested Development's really kind of what it is.
Well, I mean, and it's funny that you use an idea like the American dream, because I would say this is something that was litigated and relitigated countless times in the 20th century by some of the most canonical figures in literature, like F. Scott Fitzgerald. Mm-hmm. The Great Gatsby is a story about how false the American dream is. Death of a Salesman is a story about how false the American dream is. John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men is a story about how false the American dream is. But none of those are funny.
Yeah.
So, I mean, imagine if someone wanted to critique the American dream, but they wanted to satire it and not dramatize it. I think that's maybe what you're getting with Arrested Development.
Yeah. I'm just imagining now the Bluths in the 1920s in the style of...
Oh, man, that'd be so good.
Oh, Lucille totally works. I mean, I think that's...
Lucille's perfect.
Yeah,
and so is George Sr.
George Sr. 100% is, yeah.
And like Joe would be like a medicine man who's like selling his weird potions out on the street.
Hey, remember me?
would be amazing.
Are we good?
Are we good?
Are we good?
So we're good, right?
Look at how much yes is in you. This is something we talked about in the last episode, at least as we're recording this. It's I was unnerved by how loudly it appeared as if Will Arnett was shouting into Michael Cera's face. He was screaming. Look at how much yes is in you. It's really solid comedy. So,
well, I feel like we've harped a little bit on season 4, but how much have you guys actually watched season 5 so far? Because that's just come out, and like to me, it was kind of a return to form for the Arrested Development equation, for lack of a better phrase. Like it felt more like, here's this family, here's how they try to get through X, Y, and Z problems, as opposed to here is each individual member of the family. But what have you guys felt about season 5 so far?
Yeah, I've only watched about 11 minutes of it, so I don't really I can't really say anything about it.
You're supposed to be the professional here, John.
I haven't finished season 4. I'm trying to do it in order. But Colin watched it, and Colin kind of echoed what you said. He said that it's kind of a return to form, and I think you said a couple episodes were a little weak, but that middle chunk was really good. And
episodes 3 and 4 are if you dislike season 4 because you thought it departed from a particular format that you thought worked, then you'll definitely like episodes 3 and 4. It's not such a departure from season 4 because they really continue at least a lot of the stories. Rebel Alley and Ron Howard's whole family, including Bryce Dallas Howard, appears in season 5.
John, you have no idea. It's so funny.
It's
my
nuts. There's maybe a moment when George Michael is trying to alienate Rebel's family by dyeing his hair red, and they just love it. So he takes a selfie with them. Yeah,
no. He's trying to dye his hair pink.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no,
and
sorry.
it turns out red. Because maybe he left it in too long.
It's like Howard Red. Yeah.
And I think Ron Howard, like as the narrator says that at one point, he was Howard Red.
It's Howard Red. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say, I've only watched each episode once. I think the funnier episodes are probably funnier than anything in season 4. And it feels like a course correction, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But what's also maybe a bit confusing.
So did the remix of season 4.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. The only thing I would say though is because it was truncated, because it was really stopped before it finished. It's difficult to know what they want to do with it. So and I know we'll talk about it at some point because my God, we do a podcast about it. Yeah. But I think I want to reserve something of a blanket judgment or criticism until I see what Hurwitz is doing with all of this, because when he announced it initially in May, the implication was you're getting all of season 5, and then we learned it's only half, which is fine, but it feels like half of something.
Do you know why? Is it like a Tambor issue? Is it like a Portia de Rossi issue?
I don't know. I don't know what he could do. Because so Portia de Rossi has retired, and she has a very small arc in season 5. But all you need to do is say to someone, "So Portia de Rossi didn't want to do this," and you can start to see and feel how he was trying to work his way around it. Yeah.
But they lead up to it like they're trying to evolve her storyline in season 5, and if that's the case, then we're in a lot of trouble with the second half of season 5.
I think you're right.
Not to freak you out too much there, John.
In a bit of trouble. and that's all I would say is that it feels. My reaction to it is not unlike anyone's reaction to watching half or reading half of something. Well, this seems promising, but
you only read Eat and Pray.
I haven't read the other half or watched the other half, so I can't really say.
I only watched until Don Corleone was in the hospital, and then after that, you know.
Yeah, no, I know.
After that,
I know. It's like
I'm not even going to believe
it. I will reserve judgment on The Godfather until I see the second half. So yeah.
Okay, so this might be the like we've been talking about, a little bit of a heavier portion of the show, but how do you guys feel like Arrested Development frames alcohol use? And like, I don't mean to like attack our listenership in any way.
Yeah,
but like
bunch of louses listen to this show.
Yeah, but like we always try to encourage smart, healthy, and appropriate drinking habits.
Sure.
You know, everything is okay in moderation.
I think as far as the show goes, I think they're all kind of hitting that, except for Lucille, who is an absolute drunkard of a person. She wakes up at 4, starts drinking at 4:15.
Yeah, zip me up and then get me a vodka. Yeah.
I think
have you seen how he's zipping me up?
Yeah, I think
look how he zips now.
The show that's what really, it is. Like, the show doesn't approach it as like a serious thing. It's always used as like some type of comedic framing, I think. And
I might push back against that a little bit.
Do you think the
I
show?
actually would too.
I think with,
honestly,
I think with Job and I'll say this. I think with Job and Lindsay, I think there's a way that alcohol is used in popular entertainment as a kind of medicinal intervention for depression or dissatisfaction. So think about a show like House, for example. So why does House always abuse substances? Well, he's super sad. And I think
he's in a shitload of pain too.
Well,
his legs don't work.
Fair enough. But if you're paying attention, it's not just the leg pain. It's the emotional pain.
Okay, all right, sure.
Yeah, anyway, but I think with Lindsay and Job in particular, I think it's about they drink because they're sad.
Yeah, but I don't think they drink that much in the show. Enough for me to notice and say, oh, that's sad.
Really?
Well,
Perry,
I disagree with you.
No, please.
Yeah, I disagree with you,
yeah.
actually. And the reason is that so here's my take on it. My take on it is that Job drinks because that's what he has seen, and to a lesser extent his father, and to a greater extent his mother, has seen them drink constantly. So you guys have talked a lot about how we see Job at the model home in the original run at maybe, 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning with a glass of whiskey in his hand. And that to me indicates that he just feels like that is what's normal. Whereas, so it's the fine line between implicit and explicit. I think Job falls into the implicit category while Lindsay falls into the explicit category. And that's established in season 3 where she is told, or we learned that she's been told by her mother, as soon as a bottle of vodka is opened, it's going to go bad. And so you have to drink all of it. I don't mean to laugh and belittle that notion, but
no, I think that's you one should. Of the funnier that's the silliest bit of nonsense I've ever heard. Yeah,
no, yeah. Absolutely. And then Michael turns around and goes, "How long you been at this?" to his mother. Oh God, it's so funny. Sorry.
I mean, So I think with characters like Lindsay and Job, there's nothing really new here. They're doing what a lot of popular entertainment does with alcohol. What I think is unique is what the show does with Lucille, because Lucille drinks more than anyone else. But we're not led to believe that she's doing it because she's sad, or that she's doing it because she's had a bad life, or that she's doing it because she's perhaps dissatisfied with her particular situation, because presumably this is just who Lucille is. Lucille drinks because Lucille enjoys being drunk. And what I think is interesting about it is this is a show that's trying to suggest this is a character who has absolutely no compunction about just enjoying something that she knows everyone else thinks she shouldn't. And it's so fascinating in that way, because I would argue as viewers, we don't know what to do with someone who just unapologetically enjoys anything in excess. Because, Perry, you said this a moment ago, everything should be consumed in moderation, whether it's liquor or books or pornography or sex or just pick your thing, right? It's like just be balanced about it. But with Lucille, she enjoys how much excess there is. And that's what I think is fascinating. And I told John before we started recording, I might mention Cersei from Game of Thrones. Oh. I think this is...
And you did within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think this is part of what I like about Cersei is that she just enjoys things in excess unapologetically, and we just don't know what to do with that. And that's...
Oh, fuck off, Cersei.
See, I would argue against that, though, in that
okay.
Lucille to me reads like she is functioning based off of alcohol as opposed to enjoying it. You know, like Michael. Okay, so I don't remember exactly which episode it is, but Lucille's in the model home and goes, "Get me a vodka rocks," and Michael goes, "Mom, it's breakfast," and she goes, "And a piece of toast."
Yeah, that's actually the Buster Keaton Fall episode. Yeah, I think it is.
Oh, that's that's the one where they build the house.
Yeah, I think maybe that's in season 2. Yeah.
No, that's the name of the episode there, Colin.
I mean, is there?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Colin, you dumbass.
I'm so sorry.
I mean, is there anything different between like Lucille and Don Draper, apart from Don Draper's mopey bastard, and Lucille's not?
But I think because of Don Draper's history, I think part of what Mad Men tries to do is it tries to unpack where Don Draper came from. And I think with someone like Don Draper, use
Sterling. Use any of the people in that show.
Well, sure. But I guess what I would say as well is within a show like Mad Men, whether this is true or not, it wants to establish this notion that this is just culturally acceptable behavior in the same way that just everyone carrying smartphones today is culturally acceptable behavior. The difference is that in a show like Arrested Development, on all sides, Lucille is being told this is not acceptable, but she just keeps doing it anyway because she enjoys doing it. I think that's the difference. I think it would be different if everyone else was drinking as much as she was, but no one else is doing that.
I mean, but you got to think that she started drinking around that time as much as everyone else did, okay? And she just kind of...
she's not that old.
Well, I mean, let's say 70s then.
Okay, late 70s probably.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, even she was a dancer in the USO Win.
That's true. Yeah.
So like that would have been around probably around that time.
Yeah.
Well, but when I think of Mad Men,
Vietnam exactly.
When I think of Mad Men,
I
think of 50s.
That's not what
50s, 60s.
When did the Coke ad air? That's the end of Mad Men.
No,
60s,
that was
right?
Mad Men took place late 50s, early 60s.
Okay, so we're like 5 years off. Regardless, I think she has got in that. I think she's gotten that mindset and stayed in that mindset.
I can see that, though. I can see that,
because she's never... Nobody's... Like, the only time
as
that
Colin takes a sip of bourbon.
The only time that we see her, like, drink... I don't know. I mean, the only times I can think of her drink... She's never gotten drunk, I don't think, on the show. I've never seen her, like...
Oh, I just assumed she was drunk all the time.
Well, no, because like a good example would be...
I just assumed there was like a base level intoxication the whole time.
She has like that Marion Ravenwood fight scene with Kitty where she drinks her under the table.
Well, yeah, but...
And then when she's done, she gets up.
Oh, man.
She's the soberest person alive.
Well,
like,
but she had been in rehab, so she might have been sober for the first time in several decades.
Maybe for like 15 hours. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I guess...
I see what you're both saying.
Okay, cool.
I totally get it. I just don't feel that way about it. I do think that don't be a drunkard, obviously. That's something that I shouldn't have to say, but also I think that that's just part of Lucille's character. It's like if she's not hanging out with a martini in her hand, you're like, what's wrong with Lucille?
Well, I guess the only thing I would say is, I mean, clearly alcohol is being used as a kind of symbol or metaphor here. I think what alcohol is ultimately being, at least with Lucille, what it's being used to signify is a kind of excessive enjoyment that characters like Michael just don't know what to do with, because Michael is someone who...
Michael gets drunk, though. That's the difference.
Well, but Michael gets drunk from time to time. But
rarely.
I guess... Yeah, it's rare, but the point I'm trying to make is Michael is someone, and we've talked about this, who has a complicated relationship with enjoying things.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And for Lucille, drinking is about enjoyment. It's a kind of unapologetic enjoyment, and and again, unlike Job or Lindsay, there's no sense that she's doing this because she is trying to forget a bad thing that's happened. It's just, no, I enjoy drinking and I enjoy being drunk, and I know it's not acceptable, but I don't give a fuck. And I think there's something quite fantastic about a character who just enjoys unapologetically.
I think that I agree with you, but I also think that in the context and the world of the OC that is Arrested Development,
don't call it that. Don't call it that.
I think that is completely accepted for Lucille to drink all the time. I think that if it was real world, sure, but this is a world where, they eat macaroon and see ostriches.
Yeah, but I guess I would say, yeah.
If it was like Mad Men in 2018,
I don't know what you got, but all I saw was a vision of an ostrich and no boner.
No boner.
I guess I would just say, I mean, the only context we're given is Lucille, too, who doesn't drink at all. Stan Sitwell doesn't seem to abuse alcohol. I don't think I've ever seen George Sr. drink under any circumstances. There's something about Lucille's...
No. I was thinking about that today, actually. I don't think I've seen, even in season 4, when he's actually in the penthouse, I don't think that he had a drink in his hand or near him. And I mean, sure, he spent most of his time in quote-unquote lockdown, but even when he's out of it, when he's in the penthouse under house arrest, I don't think even once he had alcohol.
I can't think of a time that George Sr.'s drank.
I haven't either.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, and I'd have to go back and check it. He might have been holding a glass of champagne when he was toasting, at the very beginning of episode 1, when he was saying, "Here's who's taking over the Bluth Company."
Yeah, but I mean, and I think you would probably say the same thing. There's a difference between having a glass of champagne at a ceremony and doing whatever the hell it is Lucille does every single day. So, yeah.
I mean, I think like Lucille's martini is akin to like Darth Vader's like red lightsaber. I think it's just something that she is required to have.
That's really funny. Yeah, no, I know.
She forged it in whatever it's. I can't even think of it. Sorry, that was a joke.
No, I think that's really
Mustafar. There we go.
That's really clever, John. Yeah,
that's
I think
exactly what it is.
Right.
She's like, if you don't see her with alcohol, that's when you get concerned.
There's something wrong here. Yeah,
but no, I mean, I think that if you take a step back and look at it, of course, I'm going to agree with you. But in the context of the show, I'm like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Truly, I mean, it's just.
Oh, I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. I want to be clear.
No,
I think that's one of the more interesting parts of the show is that it allows someone like Lucille to enjoy something that she probably shouldn't enjoy as unapologetically as she does. And we don't have to get into this, and I don't think we should because I know we're well over an hour, but I think there's something important about a woman of her age enjoying this the way she does, and I'll just leave it at that.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue.
Enough. Okay, so last couple of questions before we get into the review then of the episode. You guys, up until season 4, had the Banana Stand Award, which was who is the craziest Bluth. Yeah. And so I have to ask, who do you guys think is the all-time Banana Stand Award winner?
Oh, man, that one's rough.
I actually have some... I think, like... I wrote some things down.
I didn't write anything down. I'm more of an off-the-cuff individual.
Also, listeners, if you haven't watched Off the Cuff, it's a wonderful segment on John's YouTube channel.
That is
Nice
true.
Marmot Production.
Yeah, I was plugging my channel.
The synergy is amazing at this point.
I think that I could probably... Are you going to say Job or are you going to say Michael? Because I think those are the two that you might say.
You say what you want to say, and I'll say what I want to say.
I'm going to say Job. I do think Michael goes real off the rails this season. Lives with his son in a college dorm.
You mean season 4?
It's season 4, yeah, sorry. Fake.
No, it's okay.
Produces his family's movie. Thinks he's banging Ron Howard's mistress, but it's really his daughter. And also
his illegitimate daughter.
And also his son's banging her too.
Job's made out with her.
Job's made out with her.
Yeah.
He tries to just fuck Lucille Alstero for money. So like he's done a lot of bad things, but overall I have to just give it to Job.
Okay.
I mean, from the outset, the man's done just the weirdest stuff. And this season, he like has a colony of sad bees. He is beads? Beads. He thinks that
we're still talking about beads.
he's like a 50-year-old in an entourage of 20-year-old people, like
Boy,
a singer.
He has a 20-year-old's abs, though.
He does. He's
Let me tell you that. My God.
He does a crucifixion gag.
Yeah,
trick.
he does. Yeah.
He. I mean, but that's just this season. Like previously, he sank the boat by blowing it up. He faked a trick. His dad died, and the first thing that came to mind was, I'm going to do a trick for it.
Right.
He wants to go into prison, so he swallows a key, and then he has to puke it out, but he can't. He's terrible to Marta. He bangs the dude that he thinks Michael likes. There's so many things.
Nosh Bagalia.
Nosh Bagalia.
Yeah.
Nosh Bakarmat.
I think that he's got. I mean, we hadn't even mentioned like Franklin. Like the whole Franklin thing is just out of this world. The magician stuff. Apparently, he fucks Tony Wonder. I found that out. So
yes, he does.
There's a whole lot.
Oh no, you found that out already?
Yeah,
Oh,
well, I watched
John.
11 minutes of season 5, and that's what's in the first 11 minutes.
So I wrote Job down as well.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of them that I wrote down because of Franklin. I mean, Franklin's insane. My God, he needs a therapy puppet. But I actually chose Tobias. I was thinking about.
Tobias, I think, always wins.
Sure. Okay. Sorry.
I thought that you meant like without Tobias.
Okay. Sorry.
The guy was a fucking blue man.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
let's
he just kind of blows this curve, I guess.
Yeah, he does.
But I when I was thinking about your question, Perry, I thought, well, I mean, it has to be Tobias, right? My God, he thinks he's a mole. But he thinks that's an audition, so he rents a mole costume. And he attacks a small city, and you can actually hear this. He's saying, I'm a mole. And I think it's just, I think...
I'm sorry.
I think
that's like one of my favorite parts of that season.
Yeah, I know.
It's nuts that he does that.
And it still holds up. I think it's Tobias. I would say Tobias, yeah.
Who do you think, Perry?
Well, I got to be honest with you. I'm right between the two of y'all.
Yeah.
Who's between Job and Tobias?
Joe Bias. I'm Joe Bias.
Joe Bias. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Joe Bias, a cup of coffee. But you could argue Michael all day long, I think.
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, a couple of months ago, I would have argued Buster.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Simply because of his regression.
Yeah. Also, he has fallen off the wagon.
Also, there's a great joke, and I don't know if you've gotten to it yet, Colin, but there's a great joke in season 5 where George Michael goes back to the model home and he just starts to dive into his past, and he walks in and Ron Howard, narrator, goes, and George Michael went into what can only be described as, and there's this voiceover that goes, total regression. Where he just goes back through like all of the first 3 seasons of Arrested Development and goes, oh my gosh, and he opens the box from the creation of Adam scene.
Oh wow, with the little penis.
And he goes,
yes.
He goes, I don't remember it being that small. I'm sorry, I don't mean to ruin that for you, but it's so freaking funny. Anyway, I would have said Buster a couple months ago, but like I'm so firmly planted between Tobias and Job that I don't know if I can make a firm decision one way or another, because they're so off the wall. They're so like out there as characterizations of these notions of, one is down on their luck and the other is Job. But no, The other is, trying to make their way in a world that doesn't want to accept them.
It's difficult to know which is which, actually. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. But they're always trying to, establish themselves. And it might be like I'm also leaning towards who do I admire the most out of everybody on the show.
I think that has to be Tobias, though, because at least Tobias has a positive outlook on everything.
Sure, yeah.
And so even when he fails miserably, he doesn't see it that way. He never sees it that way. And I think that would be amazing if all the Bluths could have that. I think they'd be doing a lot better because Tobias can fail and be like, oh, I'll keep going. It doesn't matter. I think that's pretty remarkable for Tobias. I mean, even though he is a lunatic, but he still has a cheery disposition, I guess.
He certainly has a cheery disposition. Yeah,
that's important in the context of this show.
Well, I wasn't trying to suggest that it isn't important, but
at least Tobias genuinely cares about debris. And Job has not cared about anything ever.
Oh, that's not true.
Except for
that's not true
his
at
dad
all.
Loving him.
Oh, that's not true. He cares about a lot of things.
What else has he cared about besides his dad's love?
Well, I mean, that's one thing. Franklin, he loves Franklin. I think
both are the worst.
I think he genuinely loves Michael and wants Michael to love him.
I mean, I could get behind that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, you look at that.
And he loves his
scene
magic
with Kitty.
He loves Kitty.
Okay.
He doesn't, but
no. Okay. Well, anyway.
But that's a couple of things that Job loves.
No, you're wrong. I mean, objectively, you're wrong. Just saying.
Okay.
Welcome to the things I cut out of the Hop Ons podcast.
Welcome to How the Sausage is Made behind
the
Hop Ons Podcast. Okay, well, that's about as much as I have for you guys on the topic of Arrested Development. Before we actually get into our bourbon review, which is Wild Turkey 81 proof. And so we've reviewed Wild Turkey 101 on the show before, but it seems to me like Wild Turkey 81, which is just kind of their standard Wild Turkey offering, shows up in Arrested Development quite a bit. And
does it really?
It really does. So I've noticed it, and this is just kind of a product of me being aware of brands, not just as a bourbon lover, but also as a graphic designer.
You're a graphic designer?
I am, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Oh, I didn't know that, Perry.
We didn't know that. We'll talk to you about stuff after this is over.
Yeah, what do you think of our logo?
The Hop Ons Podcast?
Yeah.
I actually really like it.
Awesome.
Colin made it. I'm very proud of him.
I am not a graphic designer.
You did good.
Thanks, buddy. I feel good about things now.
No, okay. I would actually do something a little bit different with it, but that would just be...
Tell me what you would do differently.
Tell us right now.
I love constructive criticism.
Okay, so I would take the actual Hop On Podcast word, put it at the top of your logo for the show, and then underneath it have kind of line art for the stair car.
Oh, I'll think about that, Perry. Thank you.
Can you do that, Colin?
We'll find out.
Oh, okay.
Guys,
I'll shoot it to Perry and let him do it. So
no, I could do it for you.
Okay, so I'm gonna look forward to the new Hop Ons Podcast logo brought to you by Perry, whose last name I don't know.
It's Ritter. Yeah.
Ritter,
like John.
And your brother's name is Dane.
How
your
on
family
earth
has
do you know that?
Has the coolest. I listened to a podcast. You had him on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
John Facebook stalked you.
I'm outside, Perry.
I was like, what on earth? How did you know?
I'm in your
my brother's
driveway.
name is Dane.
That's why. Open the door, Perry.
That's a pretty cool name, though. Dane Ritter.
Dane, it's a great... Dane and Perry are good names.
I mean, these are... I think it's actually the last name. I can't think of a first name that wouldn't work with the last name Ritter.
John? Jason?
John Ritter.
John Ritter's a great name.
No, you could totally.
He's also an actor, but
no, I know that. I'm well aware.
You could totally star. I mean, if your name was John Ritter,
it's his son.
You could totally star in an action movie film franchise.
Anyway, I'm so sorry. We got so derailed. So Wild Turkey's in Arrested Development.
Wild Turkey is in Arrested Development.
Sorry, Dane.
No, it's okay.
Or Perry, whoever you are.
I'm Perry. Dane's my brother. Dane's the poet out of the two of us.
Oh yeah, I did stalk his Twitter. He is a poet.
No, Colin. He legit is. Like,
is he really a poet?
Yeah. Whoa. Seriously.
Okay.
Yeah, my younger brother is a published poet.
Well, I would love to read his poetry and possibly incorporate it into my classes.
Real uppity about it.
What are you talking about? How would I? If I was uppity about it, that means it's good, I guess, based on the paradigm that you just established. So, yeah, I'm uppity about it. Your poetry's awesome, Dane Ritter.
Anyway, we got really off the rails. Sorry. The graphic design thing threw me off.
Okay.
I just want to go. I want to go back to school for that, and I'm interested in it, so that's why.
Well, anyway, as a designer, as a bourbon enthusiast, I've noticed like at there's a specific episode. I think it's the one where they're trying to. Oh gosh, I can't remember. I think it's the one where they build the house. I can't remember exactly. But they're wheeling boxes of liquor out of the penthouse.
Oh, okay.
And there's a whole case.
That's the episode where Job's talking about the $30,000 suit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that they wheel out it's like 6 cases high, but one of them is Wild Turkey.
Okay.
Yeah. Turkey is always on the bar at the model home. Or just about always there.
Okay. Wow. Okay, we have not paid attention to this.
Wow, man.
Yeah, and I think actually in season 4, John, I don't know if you've gotten there yet, but there's an episode where Maybe goes to the bar, and she actually goes, "Give me a Wild Turkey." I don't remember if it's neat or on the rocks, but she asked for it.
No, I haven't. Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
awesome.
It features pretty prominently in the show. So Wild Turkey is, of course, a kind of heritage brand in Kentucky. It has been around, I think, since like the 50s or 60s.
Wow.
Their current master distiller, Jimmy Russell, is early 90s to late 80s.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and his son, Eddie, is in line to take over as their next master distiller.
Wow.
Oh, this says Eddie Russell. This one says Eddie.
Yeah, so Eddie Russell actually just took over as being the master distiller, I think.
Oh, I got you.
Now that I really think about it. But like, I have a bottle of Turkey 101 right here that still says Jimmy Russell. You guys probably can't see it.
Oh, cool.
No, we actually saw it at that time.
Oh, okay. Well, great. I don't know if I still look like a Blade Runner robot.
No, you do.
Not,
yeah,
but
sometimes you do. Yeah, it's okay.
I'm sorry, guys.
Oh, it's okay. You currently do, but it's okay.
It's like
great.
What happens is you talk a lot and the frame freezes, and then it's like a weird David Cronenberg movie happens, and 400 frames go at once, and then you show up in real life. And that's what happens.
Hi, I'm waving right now. I don't know if you can see me or not, but I'm waving.
No, we can't at all. At some point, there you go. There. Oh my God, it was like 5 million miles an hour. Can I ask, is Wild Turkey considered like a low end bourbon?
So, unfortunately, Turkey does tend to be considered lower tier. What was that?
He's opened the bourbon.
Was that the cork?
I don't want that much, dude. Seriously. I'm already sweaty as shit. Yeah, it was the cork. Yeah.
It sounded like a duck call. I'm sorry.
It was the turkey part.
Yeah. Well, I have to have you drink at least a little bit of it there, John, because
Yeah.
We have a review system on the show of nose, palate, finish, and price. Each category is out of 5, and then we tally it up for a total out of 20. And then we give you the thumbs up or thumbs down on whether or not you should buy it.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I need to smell, put my face in this?
Yeah. So I would encourage you guys, as not necessarily normal bourbon drinkers, to smell it one of two ways, or both ways, actually. So the first one is to put your top lip against the rim of the glass with your nose into the glass and smell.
You don't know how to smell shit, Colin?
No, it was the top lip. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. I think like, what's the other way? And then we'll see.
I'm gravitating towards Lucille falling over territory.
Yeah, you're getting a little drunk. Okay.
The other way is actually how Colin has his mouth right now, where you place it between the crevices. I don't want to use the word crevice, but that's the only word I can think of.
Yeah, I got you.
Of your mouth, at the corners of your mouth, rather, and then you smell. John does not like that.
No, I don't. What is it? It's rubbing alcohol, hairspray almost is like.
Yeah, no, I actually completely agree with you.
It burns me. I know that much.
It smells sweet to me.
Does it really smell sweet?
I
don't think so.
Maybe,
I think it smells like actual like mousse, hairspray, something like that.
Well, I don't smell that. I smell a bit of. Hold on, stand by.
It's very chemically, I think, is what I smell.
I think I smell with you. Yeah.
Yeah. No. I think if I'm trying to be generous to this 90-year-old man or his son who has clearly succeeded because of nepotism, there's a bit of caramel there that I smell as well. Maybe.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess I could. You're such a dick to this really old. He's like probably 875. This old.
I think I was being more dickish to his son than I was to the old man.
I mean, like I can definitely get. We're the worst at reviewing bourbon, by the way.
No, we're not very good at this.
This is like sideways.
I like this though. This is a lot of fun. I'm going to be really honest.
I mean, I think it is like super. I can get a caramel, but it's like a shitty caramel. Like
I didn't say it was good caramel.
If you went like to the. Like, oh, I got to get movie snacks, and you go to the Dollar Tree, and you get some of those Goats' whatever they're called.
Well, see, I was thinking that really cheap brand of Werther's Original.
Oh, yeah, that's what it smells like.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So
mixed with, like, it's really chemically.
Yeah.
I will say that.
So I would challenge you guys to question whether or not you smell anything kind of floral about it, because that's what I actually get mostly on the nose. Despite the
No, I mean, listen, and I'll be
fucking didn't let it finish.
And I'll be completely honest. I acknowledge a obvious deficiency as far as tasting and rating bourbons is concerned. But you say floral, I say no, thank you, sir. I'm so sorry.
No, I think that. No, seriously, Perry, I think I'm still just getting hairspray. I don't think anything floral.
No, I
don't
see
think
that.
It's there.
I see that too. No, I definitely see that.
Okay, so wait a minute. Maybe a chrysanthemum that's been sprayed by hairspray. I get that.
Honestly, that's about where I was going with it.
Wow. All right, so what's the next thing? Do we drink it?
John gave me a look like, way to go, asshole, but I was right there.
Listen, you're a little drunk. My neighbors are not going to be happy that you're so loud. I'm trying to get through this and be a professional bourbon reviewer for our good friend Perry. What's next?
The next
drink
step
it? What
is,
do we do?
in fact, taking a drink of it, yeah.
Okay.
So
We've done enough of that tonight.
I mean, I think overall, like, it's obviously the burn comes from the proof. Is that right? Is that why it doesn't burn as much as like a Blanton's or?
So here's what okay. So there are a lot of higher proof bourbons out there, and I mean bourbon at its highest has to be, I think, 145 proof.
Oh wow, okay.
Like it cannot exceed 145. I think it's either 145 or 150 proof. I have this weird theory about, and I'm not a chemical engineer by any point, or by any measure, excuse me. I have this theory that the lower the proof of bourbon, like the more water that's added to it,
sure,
the more pungent the proof becomes. And I don't have any science or anything to back it up, But I just feel like there is something about water and bourbon that doesn't quite mix exactly how we want it to in excess. And when it, not when it outweighs the amount of bourbon that it's occupying, but when you add too much bourbon to it, it becomes hotter. And like my example is, I have had, and so many of the co-hosts that I've had on the show, guest hosts, we've had higher proof bourbon. We've gone, oh, that doesn't taste like it's 120 proof. It doesn't taste like it's 130 proof. Right, yeah. But the lower proof stuff, like, 80, 85, 90, 86 rather than 85, we go, oh, that burns. Or, I would think it's higher proof. So, what was your question?
That was a fucking while ago. I said, does it not burn as much because it's lower proof? Because it does not burn as much.
Yeah, I don't.
The Bowman Brothers or the Blantons that we've had.
Yeah, I don't feel the burn either. I think this is actually. I can't. I'll be completely frank. I don't know if it's good or not, but I don't think it's bad.
No, I see what you're saying. Like,
yeah,
I think I like it.
Yeah,
I'll say that. I do think it smells like hairspray, and when I drank it just now, I definitely tasted like corn. I could definitely taste corn, like
right.
But it doesn't burn as bad, and I don't know what the price point was. Colin bought it.
It was maybe for a handle of that size, it was less than 20, but more than 15.
And this is a 750 milliliters.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
that's not a bad price point.
Yeah,
that should run
reasonable.
you about like $16 or $17.
Do you think this would be like a good bourbon for like old fashions or any kind of mixed drinks? I feel like it should be. I don't know because you're adding shit to it. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know.
I would prefer a 101, the Wild Turkey 101, for mixed drinks or old fashions.
And is it just because of those? Can you tell? Like, is the burn better? Is the taste better? What's better about it?
No, it's not about the burn. For me, it's about the amount of flavor that goes into it.
Oh, sure, okay.
Personally, what I like is if we're just talking about an old fashioned, I prefer cocktails with a spirit forward quality. Meaning, I would rather have a cocktail where I can taste the bourbon, as opposed to it just kind of sinking into these flavors of...
Yeah, I got you, yeah.
Cherry and orange and simple syrup and whatever. So if you gave me a old-fashioned with a higher proof bourbon, I would be happier. And that's why I would prefer the 101 to this. This, to me... And I typically tend to go for Bottled and Bond, which is 100 proof. I typically go to Bottled and Bond or anything that's a higher proof.
Okay.
So this, to me, just does not have the flavor characteristics that I tend to go for.
But you're you're an old hand at the drinking game, and we're not. I mean, I think like
hey John, I have both of you. I have a question for you.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
how old do you think I am?
Oh God, this is gonna be rough.
32.
No, let me go. I see some gray in your whiskers.
Jeez.
28.
You're both wrong.
How old are you?
I'll be 25 in August.
Are you serious?
We're old as fuck.
Well, I mean, I'm almost 37 at this point.
I'll be 35 in August.
Yeah, I know. I guess what. So I'll say a thing
but
about. But
you're still an old hand at drinking.
Yeah, you're an old hand at drinking.
In terms of like my experience, sure, but yeah.
He's only been legally allowed to drink for 4 years. 4 years.
So. He just right out the gate just started chugging this stuff.
Yeah, he was something of a prodigy. I guess, okay, so I wanted to say, I think, and maybe this is off point for your audience, but if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of disposable income, but you want a whiskey that's not terrible.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think this would be okay as a kind of, this is the thing I'm drinking every day, but it's not special because so
it's not like Blanton's.
Absolutely.
It's not like
absolutely.
Here's the thing that confused me though. When I bought this at the liquor store, there was a lot of did you say 100 proof?
101.
101. So there was a lot of that, but there was only a couple of these. So I was led to believe this was more exclusive. But clearly I was wrong, or clearly they had just overstocked or something at the liquor store.
Well, 101 isn't really exclusive either. It's just that I don't know. Like 101 seems to actually be more popular.
Okay.
And I don't know specifically what it is.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't done like the research behind it to go, oh, this is why 81 doesn't hold up like 101 does or anything.
Sure.
But 101, to me at least, has more flavor, is more approachable, and I again prefer higher proof bourbons because it's not a like, oh, it's going to get me drunk quicker or anything. It just, to me, means that there's less water added, so less of the flavor has been diluted.
Sure. That makes sense.
That
okay,
makes sense.
And I guess part of it is because I don't understand the intricacies of the process, so I don't think I knew that if a whiskey's 81 proof, that means it's been diluted with water.
It has.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I think that if you're a casual bourbon or drinker person, we give it out of 5, right? Is that the score out of 5?
Each category's out of 5. Nose, palate, finish, and
okay.
price.
Nose was like a.
I'm going to give it a 3.
I'm going to give a nose like a 2.
I'm going to give it a nose a 3.
Well, hold on. I can't type that fast.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to give it a nose a 3 because I think if you work, not unlike Arrested Development, you find a lot there to like.
You find a lot. I'm just going to give it a 2 because it's so chemically.
Okay.
And I don't like that much.
Okay. What's the next category?
Palate.
Is that
So
taste?
just
taste?
Yeah, the main flavor that you're getting from it.
Okay. I taste a lot of bourbon. So
yeah, me too. So that's a 5, I guess?
So on those grounds, it doesn't.
Okay, so Colin's getting
my
Uber
expectations,
home.
It doesn't taste like a snow cone. So 5.
No, I would say like on taste.
Wow.
I'm
going to give it a 5. Sure. Why? I mean, listen. I have.
You're like fucking. You're almost drunk. You're right there.
This is listen. Great inflation is a real thing, and I'm okay with that. But I'm going to give it a 5. If
you enjoyed it, who cares?
Yeah. I mean, if one assumes, I'm thinking. I don't think anyone is walking into a liquor store and thinking, this is a special night. Take me to the Wild Turkey. I think everyone knows what they're getting with this. So because of those expectations, I'm happy to say I think this is a 5. This is not gross. It's not disappointing. I think this is a passable whiskey for what it is.
Yeah, I think with the burn and not being there, which I weirdly enjoy, I'll give it a 4. I don't hate it. I don't think when I put it in my mouth, it's like. It's like annoying or anything to me. I mean, I kind of liked it, so I'll say 4. I don't love it. I'm not like. I guess the difference is like when you drink Blanton's, you can feel how smooth it is and how rich it is.
Yeah, I know.
And this, it's like now that he said the water thing, I pick up on that a lot more. I think.
Well, Blanton's is higher proof too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll give it a 4 though. I enjoy it, and I think that. It's not in any means like I think when somebody says Wild Turkey, you get a negative connotation. In your
that's
head.
And that's ultimately my point.
Before,
I guess my point is I think this transcends expectations. So because of that, I'm prepared to give it a 5.
Sure.
And I listen. You can find me on Twitter. If any of your listeners disagree with me, that's fine. I probably won't respond to them.
All right, what's the next category?
Next?
Well, I have to give my score on palate. I gave it a 2.5.
Perry. 2.5?
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
He's
because he's uppity. That's why. He's uppity.
See, this is what happens to me, Perry. You know, if I say anything that John doesn't like, then all of a sudden I'm some kind of an elitist or something.
You are.
Well, here's the thing. I
don't think that's actually true.
He is a fucking bourbon show. Of course he's uppity. about bourbon. He's gonna be.
Oh, I love you guys
It's like if
so
I
much.
gave him
Y'all
like
are so
Mad
sweet.
Dog 2020, he's gonna be like, this is really shit because he's uppity.
And I would say,
in Abingdon, Virginia, I'm gonna slam some great Mad Dog.
yeah,
Have
and
a pretty good night.
I would say of all the bourbons named after dogs, this is pretty good. So
2.5. Is there?
Okay,
Wow.
I gave it a
is it
2.5 because it's very middle of the road for me, and like it doesn't
fair.
it doesn't provide a whole lot of flavor experience, and it tapers off really quickly, which leads into my score for the finish, which is the next category. So, what do you guys
finish.
Is that
finish?
okay? So finish
so
is like.
aftertaste.
Oh, okay. Oh, I like it. I mean, it is corny though. I get corn, a lot of corn. Like if they put alcohol in that shitty diarrhea pump movie theater popcorn butter, that's what this would be like.
That sounds awful.
I would give the finish like a 3 is what I'll say.
okay, I think I'm prepared to say 4 only because of, again, I'm taking expectations into consideration.
Oh, sure.
I don't think I must confess I've never had a Wild Turkey bourbon before. I had always just ignored it because I thought Wild Turkey, fuck you.
What?
I mean, it just
Colin is definitely Ubering home tonight.
Yeah, no, I think I just walked through it. I
Wild
guess
Turkey, fuck you.
so. I mean, I guess I was just surprised that it's not garbage.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
So I'll give it a 4.
If
for
I
that
didn't have
reason.
the weird corn butter aftertaste, I would give it a 4. But I feel that.
Well, I mean, I really like
Is that that's probably not professional how I just said it, but
it's okay. I not
Corn
not that
butter?
I would know. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm prepared to say because this is better than I thought it would be. I'll give it a 4. I think I'm being very generous right now.
okay, sure.
Have you guys ever had Wild Turkey 101?
Have we Wild Turkey 101?
Yeah.
No.
No, we have not.
Okay. The next bourbon purchase that you need to make is the Wild Turkey 101, just so you can compare it to what you have just had tonight.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I think that the Turkey 101 is a superior product to the 81 proof.
Yeah, I mean, I think after maybe we'll try that and we'll definitely probably feel the same way you feel. I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yeah. We'll let you know when we do it.
I think if we had done this review at the beginning, you would not have liked it this much.
You don't think so?
Because I think you've had a lot. Like this bottle was a lot more full than it is now.
Well, I mean, but let's be
Because
clear
you've
about
had a
something.
lot of
I'm usually a little more generous than you are about these kinds of things.
That's false.
Really? Wow. Okay.
All right, Perry,
If
continue.
you've ever
What else
listened
is
to the
there?
Hop
Oh,
Ons podcast, you know that is not true.
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
price point, right? Is
Price
that the next
point.
one?
Yeah.
Yeah, price.
Was it under 20, above 15? That's good. Five?
This usually goes for $17.
What's the 101 go for?
About 20.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to go like a 4 probably. Again, because of expectations. I mean, you hear Wild Turkey, you think hobos under a bridge. you think what's going on this weekend? Are we going
love
to a
having
party?
you guys on the
Are we
show.
going
This
to
is
a party
awesome.
in the Gap in the Valley? Get a bottle of Wild Turkey, pass the bitch around a campfire. That's what you hear. But in reality, it's a decent bourbon. I'm going to go 4.
I'm going to go 2 because
What? Because you bought it. I don't give a fuck.
No, I mean for those reasons, I'm thinking 2 because I'm thinking, okay, Wild Turkey. If you buy a handle of Blanton's, they just give you a handle of Wild Turkey. So the fact that I had
Can't
to
buy
pay
a
for
handle
it,
of Blanton's there, Colin.
I don't know.
Yeah, Colin, duh.
What do you mean you can't buy a handle of Blanton's?
I don't
They
even know
don't
what that
offer
means.
it in. Okay. Well, okay. Handles are 1.75 milliliters.
Oh, come on. Okay, fine. Anyway, the point I was trying to make was I just assumed
Or
they gave
1.75
Wild
liters.
Turkey
I don't know,
away
whatever.
as a kind of incentive just for buying something else. So I guess it did not meet my expectations. Everything else exceeded my expectations. I assumed this would be cheap as shit, but it wasn't. So
It's like to me, it's like the Boone's Farm of whiskey.
I mean, and like again, I'm prepared to say that clearly my expectations and my assumptions were wrong, but I thought this was super cheap bourbon Clearly, it's not because I had to pay close to $20 for it.
Let me just get this clear if I can. You're upset because you thought it was super cheap, so it should have been super cheap, but still be really good.
If we're talking about expectations, sure, yeah.
Okay.
Again, I think I was very
I think
generous
a 2
with
is
all
fair,
the other
then.
grading. Yeah, with all the other grading, I think it's fair.
Sure.
I think this will compensate for my 2 on the price. I just thought it's wild turkey, okay? I'm thinking all the guys who bullied me in high school would say, like, fuck you, Cox, I'm going to go drink some wild turkey now. And
Go crush some wild turkey.
yeah, I mean, I just assumed it was garbage whiskey. So, yeah, I'll say 2, Perry.
Well, I gave it a 3, only because there are other bourbons that are better for the price, but there are much worse bourbons at a higher price.
Oh, sure. Okay.
too.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I like that.
So, like, 3 is, I could have given it a 2.5, like I did with the nose and the palate. But I think that 3 is fair enough because, I think I've talked about this a lot recently, but I feel like Wild Turkey is one of those brands that's synonymous with bourbon.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that to
It's
offer
the Jack Daniels of bourbon.
No, I disagree. I think that that Jim Beam is the Jack Daniels of bourbon.
Oh, sure. There you go. Yeah.
Well,
It's the same thing.
Regardless, though. But that's a whole nother conversation. But
That'll be for next time.
Sure.
yeah, that's the next time you guys are on.
Because we've been talking for 2 hours, and I
Have
don't
we really?
know.
It's been 2 hours?
It's been
About,
2
yeah.
hours. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, because we've been
Yeah.
rambling coherently.
Whoo, boy. Perry, I'm so sorry. Everybody listening.
Okay, it's
I'm
okay.
sorry
I
also.
don't mind. I'll edit it down. I gave it a 3.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. So our next segment, and we're gonna wrap this up fairly quickly, but Tips and Bits, which is our recommendation segment, where you can basically recommend anything.
Tips and Bits. It's Tips and
Everybody-
Bits with Perry. We can recommend anything. Like, does it have to be alcohol, or can it be like
Anything.
anything that I want to recommend?
Anything.
I'm reading Red Dragon, the first Hannibal Lecter book, just to get just so I can say hello, Colin.
There we go. It took way too long, but
Hello, Colin. Oh no!
Oh, did we lose
your
Perry?
Katharine
We
Hepburn is
lost
amazing.
Perry.
No, I'm still here.
Perry, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear
we
me?
can't see you, but that's okay. Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm
you're
sorry.
back. You're back. I'm reading.
Okay.
I'm reading the Hannibal Lecter book because I was bored waiting for my girlfriend in Mr. K's, and I was like, I'll just read this creepy book.
Who decides to read Red Dragon?
It was right next to me. Honest to God, that's the only reason. I looked over and was like, oh, okay. And so I bought it,
Oh, you bought it.
and it's good. I liked it. That's what for my tips and bits. Colin, what would you recommend?
I don't know.
Something real uppity and garbage that people can't keep it.
Every time. This is...
I would definitely recommend Dane Ritter's poetry. Eh?
Yeah.
Hey, John, you're my favorite now. Colin, what do you have?
I don't know. I also host a podcast called the Clutter Desk Podcast, and we just recorded an episode, and I recommended the Blink-182 album, Enema of the State. I returned to it.
Old school.
I know.
Yeah.
Man,
And
gee
and
whiz.
I'll share that with your listeners because I think when people think about Blink-182, they think, and they're not wrong. Let's be clear about something. They think immature white guys from California, but there's this moment when they surprise you with Adam's song.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a
great song.
Deeply thoughtful and interesting meditation on depression and suicide. And then if you just pause at that and think, well, maybe there's more to this band than I would have given them credit. Is it possible that What's My Name Again is actually a satire of white male culture? And I've just been listening to Blink-182 recently.
Wow.
And fundamentally rethinking my relationship with this band and that album, because that's one of the first albums I remember buying. And that's not to say, let's be clear about something. That's not to say that this is a perfect album, because it's not. There's a lot of misogyny and a lot of gaps and a lot of problems. Sure. But I think it's potentially a smarter album than people think, and I've been listening to it a lot and really enjoying it. So if you're someone who, and I know, Perry, you're about 10 years younger than I am, but if you're someone who listened to Blink-182 in the late 90s and early aughts and thought, no, you don't need to apologize. If you listened to them and thought that's my jam, but then feel a bit ambivalent about it, I would encourage you to return to Enema of the State, because there's a lot there that is really interesting and really smart and thoughtful, and I think it kind of permeates out across the album. So that's my, I'm just kind of doubling recommendations at this point, but that's my recommendation.
That's okay. I'm going to actually recommend two different things. To stay on topic with the TV show idea of the show, two different things. The first one is Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which my brother Dane has actually recommended on the show before, which is unbelievably funny. Just recently got into it, and my gosh, Michael Schur is just a genius. I mean, I think that he is one of the funniest TV comedic personas out there today. And then, I'm sorry, I lost it. I'll put it in the show notes. I'm sorry. I'll think of it when I'm listening back. I don't know what it is. I lost it. That's okay.
No, that's okay. Put it in the show notes, man. It's fine.
Yeah, I definitely will.
You can just,
John and Colin.
You can just record something and edit it in. So
yeah, I probably will.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you all so much for being here. This has been such a crazy fun episode.
Thanks for having us, man. I hope we didn't just ruin your whole everything, because we talked as long as Return of the King, basically. So
extended cuts. No, I mean, thank you for inviting us, and thank you for humoring us, and thank you for this conversation. We really enjoyed it. If people want to find us, I'm sure you can include this in the show notes. We're on Twitter at Hop Ons Pod, and we have an email address. You can find us on iTunes or any podcatcher of your choice, other than SoundCloud, maybe. I don't think we're on SoundCloud.
You have to.
SoundCloud. They're motherfuckers at SoundCloud, but we're on everything else. It's just the Hop Ons Podcast. If you like Arrested Development, or if you don't like it and you need help jumping into it, I think we're wonderful assistants.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Start from episode 1, and I think that you guys do a great job of providing somebody who kind of is your... I hate doing this, but, providing somebody who is your Gandalf through.
I like to think of us
I like to think
joint Gandalfs.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but it helps people understand the show better, and not just for first-time listeners, but allows them to go, oh, this is what works about this show. This is what doesn't work about the show. And, I think you guys do a fantastic job of establishing not just your opinions, but, I think to some degree facts about, the aspects of this show that are so great. And, maybe I'll just go ahead and throw Arrested Development in as one of my tips and bits, even though we've passed it, because I think you guys really do need to watch it and listen along with the Hop Ons podcast too. But I really do appreciate you guys being on tonight. It's so out of the realm for us. We've done a Star Wars episode before, but we haven't actually taking the time to talk about a TV show.
I really like the Star Wars episode, by the way. That's one of the episodes. Well, because I wanted to listen to your podcast before we did this, and I wanted something that I could listen to and possibly understand. So I saw that in the feed that there was a Star Wars episode, and I listened. And you have some interesting friends. I really dig that. And,
I
do. And sounds so surprised.
No,
you have interesting friends.
No, it's. I mean, it's. If someone just said to me,
"You're not just drunk all the time."
No. It's my. Excuse me. I guess my point is, you found a way to take, broadly speaking, what is a podcast about bourbon and alcohol, and also intelligently incorporate a conversation about a popular and beloved franchise, and do so in a way that was smart and not reductive. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I watch a fair amount of YouTube videos, and regrettably the commentary at times is a bit simplistic and reductive, and you didn't do that. So I was impressed that you were able to pivot in that way, and I liked it. So,
well, do I get an A in your class then, or
easily, even with grade inflation, you would get an A. So yeah.
Well, guys, thank you all so much for being on the show.
Thank you,
I really do appreciate it. I hope to have you guys back sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe when the second half of season 5 comes out. We'll
yeah, I'd be down with that. That'd be great.
I would be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. If you want to hit us up on social media, we are at My Bourbon Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you would like to find our apparel and our whatever, I can't think of it.
Merchandise? Merch?
You can head to bourbonshop.threadless.com. If you would like to become a patron of the show, you can head to patreon.com/mybourbonpodcast. Please give us a rate and review, a 5-star rate and review, rather, on iTunes. We are just now on Spotify, finally. It took 1,000 years, but we are there. Thank you all so much for listening. I know that this has been really out of the realm of what we normally talk about with This Is My Bourbon Podcast, but absolutely 100% go and check out the Hop Ons Podcast, too. I guess you guys might have a new logo soon, too.
I hope so, yeah.
Listen, Perry, I'm more than happy to send you our current logo and let you play with it a bit.
Man.
Absolutely.
Oh, I can totally do that.
Okay, fantastic.
Colin and John, thank you guys so much for being on this episode. It's been just a trip and a half.
Well, thank you, man. We appreciate it.
Perry, I've enjoyed this more than I've enjoyed most things. So thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, we look forward to having Colin and John back on in the future. But until then, I'm Perry, and this is My Bourbon Podcast.